You exist. And you don't just exist in a vacuum. You exist in the world. You have a set of beliefs, ideas, and concepts that help you to make sense of information about the world and to take action accordingly. This is called your worldview. How often do you question your worldview? Hopefully not too often. It can be a stressful experience, but hopefully often enough that you're open to improving it as new evidence and arguments arise. In this video, we're going to take a look at a worldview called Sentientism. Sentientism is a simple and broad worldview which commits to evidence and reason and grants moral consideration to all sentient beings. It seeks to be pluralistic and unifying by providing foundational values under which many questions can start to be answered. To understand Sentientism, it's best to first introduce the worldview with which it is most closely related, and that is Humanism. Humanism is a worldview that rejects the supernatural to focus on personal human fulfillment and collective human good. There's two main parts to humanism related to two questions: what exists and what matters. The first question, what exists, concerns our knowledge about the universe and ourselves. Humanism holds the methods of observation, experimentation, and rational analysis as the primary way of obtaining knowledge, and because of this it is naturalistic, meaning the belief that only natural laws and forces, as opposed to supernatural causes, operate in the universe. Science is the best tool we have to examine how the world works, and through science, philosophy, and arts, we express creativity and divergent thinking. What's important to humanism is that we subject ourselves to critical intelligence, hold probabilistic beliefs by considering uncertainty, and acknowledge ourselves as part of the universe. The second question, what matters, concerns our ethical values, the scope of who is included in those values, and how we ought to act. As the name suggests, humanism grounds its ethics in human beings, in the idea that our moral value stems from our being human, and not our belonging to any particular subgroup of humanity. The moral value of human experience is universal to all of us, and every person deserves to have their interests respected. Humanism tends to emphasize the synergy that exists between the good of the individual and the good of society. Due to our cooperative nature and the resulting interdependence of society, we should seek to base our relations on mutual care, create a just distribution of goods, and seek personal fulfillment in the service of a global human community. So, if you're anything like me, all that sounds pretty good, and you might be wondering how Sentientism differs from humanism. Well, it's in the name. Humanism is about humans, but focusing on all humans leaves open the possibility to be only about humans. Anthropocentrism is a term used to describe any view that privileges human interests over others, and where moral value is rooted in humanity. Under anthropocentric thinking, the interests of entities who are not human tend to be considered valuable only as much as they affect human beings. They aren't considered valuable for their own sakes. For example, we might want to end habitat destruction, but only because it destabilizes the climate, which is bad for human civilization. We might want to end factory farming because it pollutes the environment we rely on, but not for the liberation of the non-human beings who are exploited. Anthropocentrism is unable to justify providing non-human entities with direct moral consideration, and so any worldview which accepts this position, or at least doesn't challenge it, can allow for their exploitation and domination. Hey, remember that thing about using evidence and reason to form our beliefs? Let's try that. Is it rational to restrict the scope of our moral consideration to human beings? And if not, how should we extend it? The task of finding a suitable moral scope involves justifying a principle we can use to decide which entities do and do not deserve moral consideration. One way to start is to ask what it is about humans that makes us considerable. If we can identify the characteristic that makes humans deserve moral value, we can extend that value to other beings who share that characteristic. In my last video, Beyond Anthropocentrism, I covered this topic in depth by exploring different answers to this question, so here I'll only do a quick summary. Make sure to check that video out. In short, the reason we care about human beings and find them worthy of moral consideration is because humans are sentient beings. Sentience is the ability to subjectively experience the world through feeling and sensation. You're familiar with it right now. You experience the world through its effect on your consciousness, and you intuitively know why experiences like pain are bad, and why emotions like joy are good. The view that sentience is sufficient and necessary for moral status is known as Sentientocentrism. It's clear why sentient beings are worthy of moral consideration. We are intimately acquainted with how it feels to have good and bad experiences. We can reason about what it is like to be the subject of another's conscious experience. And if morality is about anything, it's about determining our actions based on a concern for others. So, now that we've covered Sentientocentrism as an alternative to anthropocentrism, how does this connect to sentientism? Well, you guessed it, the key is in the name. Sentientism takes the naturalistic and evidence-based component of humanism, but leaves anthropocentrism behind in favor of sentiocentrism, resulting in the maxim of evidence, reason, and compassion for all sentient beings. In the past, the word sentientism has been used as a synonym of sentiocentrism, but as of recently, is used to refer to a more progressive version of humanism. Within sentientism, there is room for a vast range of possible beliefs and opinions, so long as they share these two principles: belief based on evidence and reason, and the consideration of all sentient beings as moral patients. Both of these principles influence each other. The tendency to form belief based on evidence and reason should lead to a rejection of anthropocentrism and an acceptance of sentiocentrism, as naturalism shows that we are just another species. A unique and powerful species for sure, but not one that is unique in the possession of the sentience which makes us morally valuable. On the other hand, compassion for all sentient beings should lead to a tendency to form belief based on evidence and reason, because in order to improve the world for all sentient beings, we must be correct in our assessments, effective in our actions, and focused on what we know is real and significant, which is the lived experience of sentient individuals. Let's explore some of the specifics that sentientism does not provide the answer to. First, sentientism does not provide the answer to any specific variant of the question of what exists. The origin of the universe, the correct interpretation of quantum mechanics, and even the nature of consciousness itself are all questions on which sentientism remains agnostic. All that matters is that beliefs are formed based on evidence and reason. We should never be 100% certain about anything. Instead, we should hold probabilistic beliefs and continually modify them based on new information, being open to new theories. The question of which entities are sentient is particularly relevant, but without access to the experiences of others, we can never know for sure who is and what isn't. While it's clear that sentience can be found across the animal kingdom, because of the grave consequences of the objectification of sentient beings, we should give the benefit of the doubt to creatures we view as having a low probability of being conscious, and should be open to the possibilities of artificial and extraterrestrial sentience. Second, in terms of moral consideration, sentientism only holds that all sentient beings are moral subjects, and is neutral on how sentient beings are considered in relation to others. Some sentientists hold an egalitarian view that the interests of all sentient beings deserve equal consideration, regardless of their varying complexity. Other sentientists would hold the position that some beings are more considerable by virtue of their emotional and cognitive complexity. However, it's not as simple as saying that the more sentient a being is, the more consideration they deserve, because sentience is multidimensional, and any attempt to account for the complexity of sentience on a single dimension may introduce anthropocentric bias. The way we structure the moral community is an important topic, with far more nuance than I've covered here, and more work is needed to flesh out the arguments for and against different views. Finally, while the concern for sentience as the morally relevant characteristic is sometimes associated with utilitarian philosophers like Jeremy Bentham, sentientism itself is neutral on any specific application of its broad ethical statements. Consequentialists, deontologists, virtue ethicists, and any variation of moral theory are welcome under sentientism, so long as they include in the scope of their consideration all sentient beings. All of these are questions that, while individual sentientists may have strong opinions on, sentientism itself remains agnostic. It serves only as a philosophical platform establishing the basis of how we should come to our beliefs, and it's up to each of us to decide how to build off of it. To complete this video, let's go over some implications that sentientism has for our society today. What would our world look like if we all took seriously the idea of evidence, reason, and compassion for all sentient beings? While these principles are simple and generally agreeable, many may find their application to have radical conclusions. Because sentientism builds off of humanism, everything implied by humanism is also implied by sentientism. The creation of a free society based on principles of democracy, the separation of religion and political power, a shift to restorative as opposed to retributive justice, and the absolute end to the oppression of all human beings globally is necessary. Universal human solidarity also requires we address the need for decolonization, environmental and ecological justice, and an opposition to other harms perpetuated by our political and economic structures. Of course, sentientists will disagree about what exactly this means, whether it requires reforms to our current institutions, radical revolutionary politics, or other perspectives. The extension of these principles to all sentient beings implies some sort of political representation for non-human sentients, with the goal of ensuring the common interest of us all as the focus of our society. This, of course, has radical implications for how we live our lives today. Every year, around 80 billion land animals and trillions of marine animals are killed by human beings for food. A sentientist world would see the rapid abolition of animal agriculture, as human beings can survive and thrive on plant-based diets, and the moral consideration of sentient beings requires an end to their treatment as property as opposed to persons. For those who currently rely on the consumption of animals for their survival, a universal solidarity would ensure as a priority the provision of sufficient plant-based sustenance to everyone. Unfortunately, our exploitation of animals extends beyond agriculture, requiring an end to the use of animals for clothing, entertainment, and experimentation as well. Our exploitation of animals also extends to our relationship with the environment and ecology. In the last 12,000 years, humans have destroyed approximately 1/3 of forests on Earth, mostly due to the conversion of wilderness to croplands and pasture we use to exploit domesticated animals. Our pollution of greenhouse gases and toxic materials, and our intense exploitation of oceans have destroyed half of Earth's coral reefs since 1950. Sentientism does not discriminate between domesticated and wild animals, so a sentientist world would require we act in the best interests of wild animals as well. Sentientists disagree about what to do with the habitat that has already been destroyed. Some believe we should use the approximately 75% of agricultural land freed up on a global plant-based diet to restore natural ecosystems. However, the natural lives of animals are filled with hunger, disease, predation, and other forms of gratuitous suffering we would not wish on any sentient being. Thus, other sentientists would advocate for the minimization of habitat restoration, along with other measures of alleviating wild animal suffering. Another belief is the stance that we should seek to minimize wild animal suffering, but that the restoration of ecosystems following the rapid destabilization of the Earth system by humans is necessary to prevent a global ecological collapse and the end to humanity, preventing us from improving things in the future. Speaking of the future, a consequence of sentientism is that we must not only consider the lives of sentient beings today, but also those that will come after. Our world today is marked by divisive and competitively exclusive politics, economies based on the short-term gain of a few, and technology built not to last or to be useful to current and future generations, but to expand the effectiveness of the former. We live among current and future technologies that have the potential to wreak enormous harm to all known sentient life in the universe. Weapons of mass destruction, genetic engineering, and artificial intelligence. A sentientist world would need to come together to ensure the responsible management of resources, the careful development of technology, and the relentless scrutiny of political power, to ensure that the long-term future of sentience is a good one. And we should take seriously the idea that the continuation of sentient life, the bringing of new beings into existence, may not be in their best interest after all. Alright, that's it for my introduction to sentientism. If you want to learn more, there is a Sentientist website with more information about the worldview and links to forums. Jamie Woodhouse, a premier advocate for sentientism, also runs a YouTube channel with over 150 long-form conversations with some very interesting people about themselves and their opinions on these topics. I'm interested to hear your opinions on a sentientist worldview, so make sure to leave them in the comments below. I make videos about futurism from a sentientist eco-socialist perspective, so if that's something you like, make sure to subscribe, and check out the description if you want to support my work. Thanks for watching, and until next time, peace out.